December 7, 1941, a defining date in history, the Japanese raid on Pearl Harbor, and America was at war. While the entire country felt the impact of World War II, it was the town of Orangeburg in Rockland County that made great sacrifice, their community and their homes.
The Corps of Engineers came in September of '42, gathered the people of Orangeburg together in the small schoolhouse, and basically told them they had 2 weeks to get out of town because there was a war on and everyone understood it was, a completely different time.
And CampShanks came to be, or otherwise known as Last Stop USA.
They were looking for a place where they could bring troops to a concentration point where they could then be shipped out from. Obviously, they wanted to be close to the port of New York because that's where the shipping was going on, and this was in the days before they flew people into combat. Everyone went by ship, or 99% of them. So they wanted to be near New York, yet far enough away from New York so that if New York were bombed, as they thought it might be by the Germans or whoever, that the base itself would be a little bit off and a little bit safer.
Time at CampShanks was short, only a handful of days. But life on this base was a last moment of normalcy for the GIs passing through. There were movie theaters and mess halls, 8 different living areas, all separate communities, and entertainment was a regular occurrence.
They brought in baseball players, sports figures. Frank Sinatra was here to entertain, Judy Garland, Jimmy Durante. Many of the major stars of the day, particularly being so close to New York, they would get Broadway acts and whatnot to come up and perform for the GIs.
Whatever it took to build the morale of the GIs, because for many, CampShanks would be the last time these young men and women would walk on American soil.
We've all seen Saving Private Ryan and The Longest Day and all the stories about Normandy and the Normandy invasion. Well, 70% of the American troops that landed on those beaches that day came from CampShanks. But that number of people of that invasion, God knows how many of them were killed that first day right on the beach. But you could say, without stretching it too far, that the Normandy invasion began here in Orangeburg. And the other thing about Shanks was, as silly as it sounds, it was a secret base. You weren't allowed to bring any cameras on base, any information coming and going. A lot of times trains that would come through here bringing the troops in would actually bypass the base and go up to Maine or someplace else, then turn around and come back just to throw people off who might be watching or trying to figure what units were going through or how many troops were going through. Also, the units that went through, many very famous units went through here. The 101st Airborne that recently you've seen on Band of Brothers, and the 82nd Airborne, the 8th Air Force, which did a lot of the bombing over here. But when they came through here, they were not designated by their real names. They were given a code name. So here again, if there were any spies or anyone watching the proceedings, they wouldn't know it was this particular unit or that particular unit or where they might be heading.
While the actual span of CampShanks' existence was fairly short, just over 2 years, its role in Rockland County continued beyond the end of the war.
Once the military part of it ended, the base was kept in place. The barracks were turned into apartments for the returning GIs. And if you were coming back from the military, you could live here for a relatively small amount of money. I mean, it wasn't grand conditions, but the idea was to give the troops a chance to get back into society, go to school. It's probably the reason for a lot of the growth in Rockland County, in that a lot of the GIs who came back here after the war for the low-income housing and to go to school decided they wanted to stay here, settle here, got jobs in New York City, and by then the parkways were open. The Tappan Zee Bridge came a few years later, and it became more practical to live here and work in New York or Westchester.
And today it sits as a museum, one small building on a small plot of land, yet filled with memories of what once was.
Well, what we're trying to do is preserve the history of what was Shanks, but so we tried to show with the little barracks that we built inside, with the bunks, with the gear, the maps, and some of the different people who have entertained here, to give an idea and a flavor so that people down the road, so to speak, will know that there was such a place, and keep the history, because we saw we were losing more and more of the history as time goes by. More buildings were being taken down, more people who knew what the operation was like are passing as well. So in order to capture that piece of history, we built this place.
The last community that many young Americans would be a part of, their last stop, USA, an anonymous community that even today sits unrecognized.
But I said, gee, people don't know, and I have an obligation of sorts to share what I know and try and gather some more information, because it's I mean, what would you give to go back to the Battle of Bunker Hill or Gettysburg and interview the guys who were actually standing on the lines? Well, you still have that opportunity with the World War II guys, but you're not going to have it long.
Seeing you in every lovely summer's day, in everything.